In the year 2035, technology had advanced to a point where it birthed a new world known as Connect. This digital realm was a mirror of the real world, complete with lifelike AI NPCs, masterful swordsmanship, and spellbinding magic that could only be found within the confines of the game. Over a staggering 100 million people flocked to this captivating world. However, not all was serene. At the entrance gate, a gruesome sight unfolded. A large group of lifeless bodies lay sprawled on the ground, a testament to the brutal conflict that had erupted. Amidst the chaos, a man who went by the in-game name Crash screamed in agony as deadly daggers pierced his body. Onlookers watched in shock as he fell to the ground, his life extinguished. A collective cry rang out, branding Doan a villain and an enemy of the Empire. One voice among the crowd urged the rest to attack the lone warrior. They charged forward, determination etched across their faces. Little did they know that Doan remained remarkably composed, as the system displayed his rank as 13th and his class as psychokinetic. An aggressor took aim, unleashing an arrow and crying for Doan's demise. Yet with a mere raise of his two fingers, Doan deflected the arrow, causing it to decapitate its sender. Panic set in as the leader ordered his knights to unleash a volley of arrows. The projectiles hurtled toward Doan, but he raised his hand once more, halting the arrows mid-flight. The knights gaped in astonishment. In a swift motion, Doan redirected the arrows back at the knights. Chaos ensued as they scrambled to dodge, but not all would escape unscathed. Several were struck before they could evade. With a deft roll of a dagger, Doan closed in on the leader, drawing blood with a swift attack. He then turned his attention to the remaining knights, their curses filled with disbelief at his psychokinetic prowess. One knight, however, gazed skyward and gasped at the sight of suspended weapons. Without warning, Doan manipulated the weapons, aiming them menacingly at the knights. Dread filled their hearts, knowing their fate was sealed. He lowered his hand, unleashing the deadly arsenal upon them. Leaving a trail of lifeless knights behind, Doan moved on. Bloody footprints marked his passage as he entered the castle. Dispatching the guards proved effortless, but as he surveyed the surroundings, he couldn't help but wonder about something amiss. A cough nearby interrupted his thoughts, and there stood the Pope. With a pendant clutched tightly in his hand, the Pope revealed that Doan's quest had reached its conclusion. Doan's eyes fixated on the pendant, realizing it was what he had sought for so long. The Pope spoke of God's foretelling of saviors in this world. Doan reached for the pendant, his grip unyielding, but the Pope questioned him. He asked why there were only fighters, why chaos reigned, why cities burned, innocents perished, and people were enslaved. Doan, without a hint of remorse, snatched the Pope's necklace and nonchalantly blamed the guild that had conspired with the Empire. Footsteps outside disrupted their conversation, and Doan cursed, realizing the guild's latecomers had arrived. Ignoring the Pope's warning about God's intentions, he placed the pendant into a peculiar box with a central hole. As the box accepted the pendant, it revealed a concealed passage below. Descending into the passage, Doan's thoughts were jumbled when he spotted a book and various objects hovering in a purple light. These, he surmised, were the first mythical items within Connect. Memories of 5 years ago flooded back, major guilds colluding with the Empire, leading to the world's destruction. Doan swiftly stashed these precious items into his inventory, aware of the guild's looming fury if they discovered he had obtained them first. As he pondered his next move, his gaze fell upon something intriguing resting on a nearby table, sparking his curiosity. As he examined the peculiar game cartridge in his hand, he couldn't help but wonder why it was there. Suddenly, a powerful surge of energy radiated from it, causing him to wince and clutch his knee in discomfort and confusion. The thought crossed his mind that it might be a connection error, and he pondered its significance. In a moment of panic, he decided to log out immediately. In a blink, he found himself back in his room, jolting upright. His heart raced as he spotted a menacing stab wound near his chest. A voice admonished him to stay still. Frustration bubbled within him. Things were going too smoothly, he thought. The man, accompanied by a group of well-dressed individuals, questioned his restlessness and suggested that he should embrace a peaceful death. Anger welled up inside him, and he spat out insults, branding them as nothing more than worthless scum. Within the group, one man informed their leader about capturing Doan and inquired if they should bring him in alive. The response was chillingly clear. The president only desired Doan's head. The group then took a firmer grip on him, mocking his audacity to believe he could escape unscathed because of his gaming skills. They scorned him, taunting that he was fearless after gaining fame. Desperation coursed through him as he begged for his life. One of the men covered his face with a menacing mask and raised a sharp blade, ready to deliver the fatal blow. Panic seized him, and he thought these men were unhinged for taking lives over a mere game. He wondered if his end was inevitable, like this. Suddenly, a voice repeatedly called him sir, jolting him awake. Panic surged through him as he sat up, bewildered. He examined his hand in confusion and glanced around, trying to grasp what had just happened. He vividly remembered his death from the stabbing. Nearby, someone groaned in pain, and a maid named Anna inquired about his well-being, addressing him as Raul. The name struck him as foreign, and he wondered who Raul was. But his astonishment deepened when he noticed a level status above Anna, indicating she was at level 3. Anna expressed concern about his cold sweat and suggested calling a doctor. He was lost, unable to comprehend the situation, feeling like an unwitting witness to something inexplicable. Then, a notification from the system appeared, informing him that his soul had settled in, activating Connect's closed beta system. He was now equipped with the user interface, and the current user count stood at 1. Panic coursed through him as he questioned whether it was some cruel joke. It dawned on him that he had somehow found himself inside the world of Connect. Stepping onto the room's balcony, he marveled at the sensation of the wind and the surroundings, a stark contrast to his previous experiences with Crash. He understood that synchronization, the connection level with Connect, determined a player's strength in the game. Normal players had around 30% synchronization, but he was close to 90%. He had maintained his top-ranking position for a decade until the major guilds emerged, but now he knew he inhabited a different body. Feeling somewhat unlucky for investing so much time in his previous avatar, he remembered that this was still a closed beta, and at the moment, he was the sole user in this world. Raising his hand, he realized he could still access his inventory even in the closed beta. He decided to scan user information, and the system detected locked user data, quickly updating his profile. Enduring the lingering pain, he discovered his current name was Raul Ashton, the youngest son of the Ashton family, the 5th Count of the Reuben Kingdom. The Ashton County was the first to succumb to Connect's influence. Memories flooded back as he recalled that the Ashton County was a prominent Orthodox family in the Reuben Kingdom. Tragedy had struck when the Count and his eldest son mysteriously perished, while the second son went missing. Chaos ensued as the youngest son inherited the county, culminating in a failed attempt to halt a monster invasion after the barrier of the Forbidden Area had been breached. Realization washed over him as he acknowledged his identity as the youngest son of the Ashton family, Raul Ashton. Gazing at the picturesque city before him, he sensed the impending ruin that would befall it in the next 3 years. Determination surged within him as he entered his room, recognizing that he no longer had Bune or Crash to rely on. It was his last chance. His fists clenched with resolve as he acknowledged the suffering he had endured living as Ban. Missing this opportunity was unthinkable. His gaze fell upon a sword on the table, and he understood that there was only one path to avert disaster. He had to become stronger. He knew that in a month, Ashton Count's traditional coming-of-age ceremony would commence, and if he reached the semifinals, he could enter the Kingdom Academy to bolster his strength and safeguard his life. However, his body suddenly gave way, and he collapsed onto the floor. Confusion clouded his thoughts. Why did he feel so exhausted after just a few swings? Glancing at his status, he realized he was only at level 5, 2 levels behind the maid. He knew he had to begin rigorous training immediately for the upcoming tournament. When the day of the tournament arrived, he marveled at the multitude of participants. A sense of duty weighed upon him as he scanned the competition, fully aware that he would have to face them in battle. Memories of his coach's words resurfaced, reminding him that it had only been 10 minutes, yet he felt utterly drained. He attributed it to the intense pain he endured during the grueling qualifiers. With the system in mind, he recalled being at level 13 during his last check, and his stamina was primed. He had a solid plan for the matches, filling him with confidence about reaching the semifinals. Suddenly, an attack from behind caught him off guard, but he swiftly evaded, causing the assault to strike the ground. He turned to find a fist behind him, and the attacker apologized, claiming it was an accident. The man referred to him as a precious noble and questioned his purpose in the tournament. Recalling the man's name as Dian, Raul realized that Dian had bullied him during swordsmanship training in the past. The family motto held that they trained like it was a real battle, treating everyone as equals on the training ground and absolving anyone of responsibility for training injuries. Dian was nothing more than a bully who preyed on the weaker trainees. Dian suggested that Raul withdraw while he still could, warning that this time it wouldn't be just one bone broken but every single one in Rawl's body. He mockingly instructed his cousins to let Rawl pass, anticipating Rawl's inevitable defeat. With a heart full of determination, Rawl vowed to crush Dian in the finals. Meanwhile, in Ashton's castle, the butler held a report for the man. When questioned about any useful individuals in the tournament, the butler was about to reply when the man's surprise was palpable. He inquired about Rawl's whereabouts, and the butler reported that Rawl had returned to his room after completing his meal. Count Melvin Ashton, Rawl's father, expressed his satisfaction with Rawl's progress. He had never forced Rawl to learn swordsmanship because Rawl was weaker than his brothers. Melvin had patiently waited for Rawl to stand up for himself. Rawl's perseverance had exceeded all expectations. Melvin resolved to visit Rawl after the finals. The day of the finals finally arrived, charged with anticipation and uncertainty. The audience, growing impatient, urged them to wrap up the match, calling for an end to the spectacle. The man facing Rawl cursed under his breath, baffled by why his opponent, seemingly weak, remained standing. Rawl, panting from exhaustion, faced a relentless onslaught of attacks. Despite his weariness, he managed to parry each strike, avoiding getting hit. The man's frustration mounted as none of his strikes found their mark. In a fit of rage, he launched a ferocious attack, shouting at Rawl to go down. Rawl, quick on his feet, slid backward to create some space between them, leaving onlookers and the audience in stunned disbelief. From the crowd, someone acknowledged that Rawl had endured the man's relentless attacks multiple times, questioning how much more he could withstand. Another voice chimed in, praising Rawl's resilience and offering support, further infuriating the man. The man swung his sword with fury, calling Rawl a rat and taunting him about running away. Rawl, undaunted, parried the man's strikes, and the crowd roared with anticipation. The man swung again, but Rawl deftly blocked his attack. With a teasing remark, Rawl taunted that he couldn't hear the man very well. Block after block, Rawl held his own, maintaining a solid defense. The man's frustration grew, and he continued to hurl insults at Rawl, questioning his honor as a member of a Count's family. Rawl, unyielding, continued to parry the man's attacks, then slid back once more, preparing for the next move. Spectators called out to the man, urging him to finish the match as they had bets riding on him. The man, known as Edmund, grew more serious, unleashing his power and forming a mana sword. He warned Rawl that he was about to end it, leaving the audience gasping in shock at the sight of the powerful mana sword. They cautioned Rawl to dodge, as a hit would mean certain defeat. Edmund swung his water-powered skill at Rawl, instructing him to meet his end. To his astonishment, Rawl stood firm, refusing to dodge the attack. Edmund, perplexed, launched another attack, causing a deafening explosion that reverberated through the arena. As the smoke slowly cleared, the referee intervened, standing in the center and declaring the match over. Rawl emerged as the winner, prompting cheers from half the audience, while the other half couldn't believe their eyes. Edmund tossed his sword aside and approached Rawl, expressing disbelief and questioning how Rawl could be the victor. He was about to explain that if the match hadn't been stopped, he would have won, but the referee cut him off, labeling him as foolish and pointing out that if the match had continued, Edmund would be dead by now. Realizing that Rawl had not been standing still but had been aiming for his neck, fear gripped Edmund, and he collapsed to the ground. Rawl approached him, mentioning that they needed to have a discussion about his disrespect toward the county after the tournament. Later, when he arrived back at their castle, Anna respectfully advised him to rest well. As soon as the door shut behind him, he couldn't contain his excitement, shouting in jubilation. He had actually won. With a smile, he opened his status and the system displayed an update. The level of Ashton's swordsmanship mastery had increased to beginner level 9. Proudly, he realized that his plan had worked, capitalizing on the game's feature that granted more experience points and mastery when battling stronger opponents. He understood that facing a more formidable adversary for a longer duration yielded greater experience points. With a clenched fist, he acknowledged the success of his strategy, thanks to his game mode, which offered an experience multiplier by removing the revive option, known as hardcore mode, with high risk and high return. He examined his status, realizing that he had previously complained, but he was now a formidable level 19. In hardcore mode, with classes in sword and psychokinetic, Rawl examined his attributes. His strength stood at 22, agility at 25, stamina at 19, intelligence at 15, willpower at 34, mana at 29, spiritual power at 35, and senses at 30. His unique traits included Psychokinetic Meister S+, Royal Lineage, and other yet undiscovered traits. Realizing that he wouldn't have been able to level up as much in a month if he had been in normal mode, he focused on the 5 unique traits. He anticipated that the rest of his traits would unlock as he continued leveling up. With the upcoming tournament in mind, he decided to test these traits during his matches. As the tournament days arrived, Raul emerged victorious in every match, with fair and clean victories. The audience couldn't fathom how the youngest son of Ashton had reached the grand finale. Speculations ran wild, with some suspecting luck or trickery. Unbeknownst to them, the early stage Connect civilians remained unaware of the player's powers. Back in their castle, Raul contemplated keeping his psychokinetic ability a secret until the right moment to reveal it to the players. He believed he could conceal it with his acting skills. Just then, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Ivan introduced himself and expressed concern for Raul's well-being, inquiring about any injuries. Raul reassured Ivan that he was perfectly fine, mentioning the presence of a priest and healer on standby. Ivan placed a hand on his shoulder, advising Raul not to let his guard down, reminding him that some wounds couldn't be healed. Raul acknowledged Ivan's genuine concern, but admitted that he wasn't accustomed to such feelings in his past life. Ivan then handed him a document, confirming that he had fulfilled his request. As Ivan was about to mention Diane, Raul interrupted, telling him not to worry, as he was confident in his victory. Ivan respectfully bowed and left the room. Raul couldn't help but notice that Ivan's demeanor resembled Melvin's when he was younger. He knew that the final opponent would be Diane, a formidable adversary who had brutally wounded his previous opponents. Raul examined the document, recognizing its value in Ashton County's betting system, which supported tournament participants. Placing the document on the table, he believed that it was enough to secure his place in the family. All that remained was to defeat Diane. The host's voice echoed, announcing the commencement of the final match. Raul faced Diane as half the audience cheered him on, urging him to win with his skills. Diane, on the other hand, called Raul a weakling and questioned how he had made it that far, vowing to make Raul regret coming up there. Diane further taunted Raul, promising that with people cheering, Raul would soon discover his worthlessness. He painted a gruesome picture of Raul crawling with his limbs cut off. Raul responded with a yawn, asking Diane if he was done. Clenching his fist in anger, Raul unleashed a powerful violet aura, overwhelming the audience with its mana. The spectators believed Raul to be no match for Diane, who appeared unimpressed. Raul analyzed Diane's stats, noting his level 42, with the class of Expert Knight, a sword user affiliated with Ashton County. Diane held the title of Ashton County Star and was considered a sword genius. Diane's stats included a potential talent grade of B, with strength at 52, agility at 41, stamina at 43, intelligence at 18, willpower at 14, mana at 32, and senses at 21. Raul speculated that Diane's potential talent was only a B, and while Diane appeared impressive, he believed it was Diane's limit. The host announced the start of the match, with Diane angrily threatening to kill Raul and branding him a coward. Ignoring the threats, Raul leaped toward Diane, swiftly positioning himself above him. Diane's attack took Raul by surprise, and he swiftly swung his sword down in retaliation. Their blades clashed, each striving not to be the first to yield. Raul forcefully pushed down his sword, causing Diane to slide back, trying to evade the blow. Angrily, Diane accused Raul of showing off, but Raul remained silent, contemplating that Diane's flexibility was below his expectations. They continued their exchange, blocking and attacking each other relentlessly. Raul noticed that Diane's strength was indeed formidable. Diane swung his sword angrily, prompting Raul to dodge skillfully. Diane questioned why Raul hadn't struck him, but Raul replied by blocking Diane's sword. He realized he could see Diane's sword clearly. Seizing an opportunity, Raul used his feet to trip Diane, sending him tumbling face first to the ground. In that moment, Raul pondered that a sword skill without practical experience was akin to a generic nobleman's sword. He couldn't help but recall how Raul had been bullied by Diane. Diane, infuriated by the trip, released his powerful aura once more, vowing to kill Raul. Unfazed, Raul calmly sidestepped Diane's attack and tripped him again, all the while noting Diane's apparent anger issues. Diane rolled on the ground, while Raul calmly remarked on Diane's behavior, suggesting he look at himself and feel ashamed of his affiliation with Ashton County. Once more, Diane charged at Raul in a fit of rage, but Raul merely punched him in the face, causing Diane to slowly fall and collapse on the ground. The audience couldn't believe that Raul had defeated Diane so decisively. Raul informed the referee that his opponent was down and inquired if the match would continue. The referee declared Raul the winner of the Ashton Coming of Age tournament, prompting the audience to cheer and celebrate Raul's victory. Despite the acclaim, Raul stumbled, realizing that he had won but had dreadful stamina. Concerned, his people immediately summoned a healer. As he contemplated his upcoming journey to the Kingdom Academy, the system presented him with the completion of the Coming of Age tournament quest, rewarding him with experience points, coins, and a random skill book. Later, in the castle, Raul's father, Melvin, told him that he couldn't allow him to go to the academy. Raul was surprised and asked for the reason. Melvin explained that Raul needed to stay by his side longer, especially since he had fallen after the match. Raul argued that he had learned that the journey of the sword was lifelong and reminded Melvin of his own words. Confidently, Raul asserted his determination to go to the academy to learn more. Melvin, taken aback and surprised, eventually smiled, realizing that Raul had truly grown. He stood up, releasing his strong aura, and aimed his sword at Raul, accepting the challenge. Facing his father, Raul knew there would be no holding back. Melvin warned him that he wouldn't go easy on him, questioning Raul about his next move. A month later, as he rode in a carriage, surrounded by knights, Raul couldn't help but reflect on his earlier confrontation with his father. He remembered accepting his father's decision and charging at him with determination. Melvin had playfully teased him, but then displayed incredible strength and skill, causing Raul to pass out briefly. Melvin explained that it was just a taste of his true abilities. Raul understood that his father's strength was vital to preventing the fall of Ashton County. He swore to get stronger to protect his family. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Melvin watched Raul depart, recalling their training sessions where he had tested Raul's determination. He acknowledged Raul's persistence and pride in the Ashton family's legacy. Raul raised his sword and ran towards his father, who encouraged him to strike. As Raul's sword changed trajectory mid-attack, Melvin received a minor wound on his face. Smiling, Melvin admitted that it was time to recognize Raul as a proud swordsman, urging him to go and explore the world. During their journey, they stopped in a forest to rest, and Raul asked Philip, a seasoned knight, about their distance to their destination. Philip, experienced and powerful, provided the information. They had a diverse group of knights, trainees, and cavalry, all with grade B or higher potential talent. Raul knew they needed to become stronger to halt their county's decline. A man named Jake inquired about the large group's purpose, but Philip defended Raul's decision, emphasizing that Raul had a plan for their destination. The free city of Mia. Raul intended to bring them there because it was a strategic location filled with quests, hidden items, and resources for player progression. The system suddenly alerted Raul to an update, unlocking the Connect community, a new guild category, and an adventure quest starting line. Upon arriving in the free city Mia, Raul was pleasantly surprised to find that the features of Connect were more accessible than he had anticipated. As he entered Mia, he discovered that his role as a quest and skill collector had already been registered, allowing him to access new quests right away. This development amazed him, and he wondered if he could unlock even more features by meeting certain requirements. A knock on the carriage door interrupted his thoughts, and Jake informed him that he could meet with the mayor immediately. Asked what he wanted to do, Raul replied that he would, of course, meet with the mayor. Meanwhile, at the main castle, the mayor of Mia, Raldo, inquired about Raul's visit. Raldo's butler informed him that Raul Ashton, the weakest son of County Ashton, had arrived with 50 people. Raldo wondered why Raul was there and suspected it might be for the fresh air, but he also saw an opportunity to extract money from Raul due to his family's income from monster materials. He ordered his butler to let them in. When Raul entered, he warmly greeted Raldo, who reciprocated the welcome but wore a seemingly insincere smile. Raldo asked Raul why he had come to Mia, and Raul mentioned his interest in training. Raldo agreed that Mia was an excellent place for training, which Raul found suspicious. Raldo then asked if Raul had any specific place in mind, and Raul requested permission to enter the cursed forest, shocking Raldo with the audacious request. Initially, Raldo hesitated, citing the forest's danger, but Raul mentioned a gratuity of 500,000 gold, which prompted Raldo to grant permission. Raul knew that this access to the cursed forest would help him grind and gain rewards to ascend and connect. As he walked through Mia with Jake and Philip, he couldn't help but notice the city's imbalance. It was designed for many players, but as the closed beta had only him as a player, it faced a crisis. Despite the economic downturn, Raul had another motive for coming to Mia: real estate. He planned to purchase cheap lands that would eventually skyrocket in value as luxury houses, guild buildings, and apartments were built. He also considered Mia a potential safe haven in the future if war broke out, making his real estate investments even more crucial. He was determined not to be financially outmaneuvered by major guilds this time around. Later, as they dealt with paperwork, Jake hesitated to sign it, mentioning his mother's advice about being cautious with documents. Raul, impatient, urged him to sign, but Jake's caution persisted. Nonetheless, the paperwork was eventually assembled. He informed the lady at the Battle Association's Nia branch office that a total of 51 members had registered for the guild. At first, he believed he had created the world's first guild in a playerless environment, making it the most advanced guild. He couldn't wait to see the bewildered expressions on his comrades' faces. Meanwhile, Jake worried about facing his mother's wrath later. At the Battle Association's Mia branch office, he eagerly announced his turn, and the lady welcomed him, asking how she could assist him. He expressed his interest in skill books and inquired about the highest rank they offered. Skill books contained various skills that could be learned by careful reading, with ranks ranging from F to S. The lady explained that their branch office provided up to rank C skill books, but rank C books were reserved for VIP customers. To become a VIP, one could achieve it through contributions, completing quests, or significant purchases, though the latter required substantial spending. He asked about the cost and was told it was 10,000 gold. Placing a bag of gold on the table, he inquired about seeing the D-rank skill books first. The lady inquired about his preference, whether it was for sword, bow, magic, or shield skills. He decided to explore all of them. Later, as they all carried stacks of books, Jake wondered if they really needed so many books, finding them cumbersome. He assured them that while it might seem bothersome now, these books would help them advance to higher levels. Philip suggested they could have purchased power armor with the money spent on the books, but he encouraged them to be patient, assuring them that they would see the benefits soon. Arriving at his apartment room, he surveyed the mountain of books before him and began to question if he had overdone it. He knew that players had limits on the number of skills they could use, and having numerous skills might not be practical. Recalling the two unknown items in the inventory when he first inhabited Raul's body, he realized they were the sealed skill decks. The recent quest had finally allowed him to use them. Opening his inventory, he discovered that one of the items was indeed the sealed skill decks, leading him to believe that completing the quest had activated them. Upon examining the quest collector, he found an unknown grade quest instructing him to collect at least 10 skill books and register them in the skill decks, with additional rewards based on the book types. The reward for completing it was skill deck activation, with extra rewards including unlocking traits and acquiring skills. Determined, he grabbed some books, figuring he needed to open the decks and hold the skill book for registration. To his astonishment, the skill decks activated on their own as a strong purple light emanated from them and flew into the other skill books. Words appeared on the deck's book, prompting him to release the book he was holding. He couldn't believe it had worked, and he noticed the sliver of mana and the book was gone. Wondering if there was a way to register them all at once, the books suddenly levitated in mid-air, accompanied by another burst of purple light that connected the deck's book to the floating skill books. Once the process was complete, he inspected the deck's book, curious if it understood his intentions. Amazed by the successful activation of the skill decks, he eagerly checked his quest status, confirming its completion. The rare skill decks had been activated, unlocking his X-grade trait, Skill Collector, and granting him the S-grade trait, Copycat. Intrigued, he clicked on Skill Collector, discovering that its effect was to activate the skill decks. On the other hand, Copycat slightly increased the chance of acquiring skills from skill books. As he inspected Copycat, he noticed its mastery was at beginner level 3, allowing him to steal skills from examined opponents and register them in the decks. With increased mastery, he could acquire higher ranked skills with enhanced power, making him realize how potent this ability was, the power to steal and use someone else's skills. The system revealed that the skill deck was of rare grade and upgradable, bound by special requirements. Currently, it stored records of 525 skills, resembling the mythical item, Skill Dex, which he had received just before his previous death. While certain aspects from his past life, such as the psychokinesis trait and items, had come with him, his skills had been reset, and this replica was no exception. Curiosity piqued, he glanced at his inventory, where only the 3 grade X traits and 1 item remained, leaving him wondering about their hidden potential. The following day, the knights were bewildered by the appearance of the system and clamored for explanations regarding the status window and guild chat. They urgently sought guidance from a priest. Meanwhile, the butler, Bernard, greeted him with a sleepy gaze. He had stayed awake all night engrossed in the skill decks. After exchanging pleasantries, he inquired if Bernard had explained things to the knights, to which Bernard affirmed his fulfillment of the task. Excitedly, he asked Bernard about his experience with the skill book. Bernard nodded in confirmation. Bernard, a servant of the Ashton family and Ivan's stepson, had worked for the county from a young age. Ivan had personally trained him. Bernard possessed an exceptional memory and a knack for swift execution, making him an ideal choice. Furthermore, Bernard demonstrated his ability by releasing wind from his hand, leaving him in awe. He commended Bernard's skills, knowing he had the power to control the wind. The system revealed Bernard's stats, affiliations, talents, potential talent, and unique traits. Despite some stat deficiencies, Bernard was well suited for his role as a servant. Having completed his preparations, he instructed Bernard to get ready, leaving Bernard puzzled about the purpose. He disclosed that they were departing as soon as the knights adapted to their situation, heading toward God's domain in the Cursed Forest. Later, within the Cursed Forest, an ogre hurled its axe at him, shattering the ground. Swiftly, he dodged the attack and taunted the ogre for its sluggishness. He retaliated with a punch, causing the ogre's head to explode before his fist could connect. He dropped to the ground just as the ogre's lifeless body crumpled. He called for the others to reveal themselves. A horde of augurs emerged from their hiding spots, acknowledging his strength and intent to kill him. The ogre leader rallied the others, ordering a charge. The ogres, driven by their leader's command, rushed toward him in unison, and he confidently stood his ground, daring them to come forth in the Cursed Forest of God's domain. Specifically, God's domain referred not only to a grinding zone but encompassed the entirety of Mira. In this blessed city, players could recover from injuries and revive upon death, making it the ultimate sanctuary. Inside the forest, the blessing only extended to monsters, which meant that the monster population remained constant even after their demise. Humans, on the other hand, couldn't be resurrected within the Cursed Forest and couldn't carry items obtained from monster hunts beyond its boundaries. Such items would disintegrate into ashes upon leaving the forest, signifying the divine prohibition against mortals possessing divine relics. However, this restriction did not apply to players who could take these items outside with the assistance of the system. While the battle with the ogres raged on, Philip questioned Jake's constant chatter, reminding him that their young master, Rawl, was handling the situation. Rawl, engrossed in combat with the ogres, exhibited remarkable power. When only the ogre leader remained, it inquired about his extraordinary abilities, leading him to demonstrate his psychokinesis by manipulating weapons on the ground. He asked the ogre leader if this was the power in question. The leader, bewildered, watched as the weapons flew toward him, ultimately dismembering him. Rawl introduced the power as psychokinesis. As Jake and Philip continued their tasks, Jake acknowledged their progress during their training, attributing their success to Rawl's guidance. He then alerted Rawl to a message in the guild chat. Rawl examined the message and, to Philip's dismay, realized the dire situation it conveyed. He decided they needed to return to Mira immediately. Meanwhile, in their Mira apartment, tension escalated as one of Rawl's men found himself facing a sword-wielding intruder. The intruder lamented that they should have acted sooner and subsequently stabbed Rawl's man, explaining that restraining themselves had become increasingly challenging in light of the presence of Ashton's heirs. Another man, armed with a bloody sword, supported the first, asserting that their earlier warnings had fallen on deaf ears. He too stabbed one of Rawl's men, prompting a question about their motives. Disregarding the inquiry, the second man slashed another of Rawl's men and reproached his siblings for their disruptive behavior. The confrontation unfolded among three individuals: Raymond, the eldest son of Count Randall Vi, Jerry, the second son, and Cale, the third son. Rawl's injured subordinate warned Raymond that they would regret their actions, but before he could complete his statement, Raymond ruthlessly stabbed him and extracted the blade. Amidst the victim's cries of pain, Raymond continued his merciless assault, all while taunting the man. Jerry chimed in, suggesting that they should handle Rawl in a similar manner. However, Cale interjected, reminding Jerry that noble families should not engage in swordplay within the Free City. Raymond brushed off Cal's concerns and questioned why they should care about the consequences when they could simply deny their involvement. He expressed indifference toward the situation, believing that they could easily escape repercussions. Ramon, still undeterred, argued that their plan had merit, allowing them to crush the Ashton family. He even entertained the idea that their great-grandfather might commend them for their actions. However, as the leader of the Ashton household, Rawl's head suddenly exploded into a shower of gore. Cale, his voice trembling, called out to his brothers, who turned around to witness Rawl's shocking demise. A furious Robble confronted the brothers, condemning their heinous act as an affront to Ashton County. He threatened retribution far beyond a mere death sentence. Ramon, Jerry, and Cale gawked in disbelief at Robble's intervention. Jerry questioned Robble's sanity and dared him to lay a hand on a member of the esteemed Randall family. Cale inquired about the whereabouts of the knights and how Rawle had made it to Mira. One of the knights, held at sword point by Philip, nervously responded that they had believed themselves to be the primary force of the Ashton family. Philip reported that they had surrounded the Randall Knights, ensuring there were no civilians nearby. Jake and Bernard stood vigilantly, watching their adversaries closely. Rawle used his psychokinesis to levitate his injured men, instructing Bernard to transport them to safety. With sword in hand, Rawle proclaimed his intent to handle the situation himself. He recognized that Randall Vi County bore similarities to Ashton County as one of the 5 warrior families in the Reuben Kingdom. Unlike the Ashton family, however, the Randalls had a relatively shorter history. To secure their position, they consistently produced exceptional knights, made significant contributions, and vanquished their rivals. Their current target was Ashton County, which had dwindled in power due to its prolonged absence of a swordmaster. Engaging the Ashtons posed no risk, for they were the least politically inclined of the 5 warrior families. Historically, conflicts between these families had often been initiated by the Randalls, with their numerous swordmasters. Jerry observed Rawle's unusual strength and noted that he had seemingly conjured a sword from thin air. The Randall knight behind Jerry, under Philip's sword pointing, cautiously reached for his own blade. Yet Rawle reacted swiftly, swinging his sword to strike the knight, who cried out in pain. The Randall Knights were dumbfounded by this turn of events, prompting Jake to sheath his weapon and defer to Rawle's decision. He instructed his men to lower their swords. One of the formidable Randall Knights questioned their sanity, believing that it was better to engage in battle. Cale charged toward this knight, wielding a massive mace to gather momentum. Rawle admonished Cale, distinguishing their current situation from training. However, a sudden, precise sword slash sliced through the air, cleaving Cale in two before he could deliver his strike. Cale's agonized scream filled the air as Jerry desperately called out to his fallen brother. Furious, Jerry cursed the knights who stood idly by and demanded to know why they weren't taking action. Frustrated and compelled by the circumstances, the knight leader, Jeremy, reluctantly drew his sword. He had hesitated, reluctant to confront a mere 15-year-old boy, but watching his comrades fall compelled him to intervene. Jeremy's name, age, and stats were displayed by the system. 37 years old, level 65, leader of the Guard Knights, and a beginner sword expert. His affiliations included Randall Vi County and Randall Knights. He possessed a Grade B potential talent, with stats that included 66 for strength, 72 for agility, 68 for stamina, 48 for intelligence, 63 for willpower, 70 for mana, and 55 for senses. Jeremy and the other knights brandished their swords, with Jeremy, nicknamed the Rapier, as the Randall family's primary weapon. They were elite fighters, and their level advantage over Rawle was evident. Jeremy at level 65 and the other elites at level 60, while Rawle's current level stood at 45. Realizing he couldn't win under normal circumstances, Rawle found himself facing their pointed weapons. One of the knights questioned why Rawle persisted, suggesting he had already done enough. The other knight asserted that they had tolerated him long enough. Regardless of his status as a young master, Rawle abruptly appeared before one of the knights, launching a precise slash that struck the man's abdomen. He gripped his sword tightly, raising it backward to increase the force behind his strike, utilizing his bear strike skill infused with bear aura. Another knight inquired about his actions, but Rawle merely cut the man's stomach, causing him to cry out in pain. Jeremy, on the other hand, lunged toward Rawle, seemingly appearing out of nowhere to strike. Despite being pushed back by Jeremy's attack, Rawle managed to deflect it in time. Jeremy expressed surprise that 2 of his elite knights had fallen so swiftly. Rawle remembered hearing rumors about his own weakness and lack of swordsmanship skills. Jeremy then drew his secondary weapon, a parrying dagger, hinting that he would take the fight more seriously. He pointed his sword at Rawle, inviting him to challenge him. Rawle noticed Jeremy's unusual combination of weapons, a parrying dagger and a rapier, which made him wonder if Jeremy was employing Randall County's sword skill known as Shooting Star. Jeremy grinned, acknowledging Rawl's bravery, and reminded him that wounds healed in Mia, insinuating that Rawl couldn't face them all alone. Rawl retorted that he believed Jeremy and his knights had not trained since arriving in Mia, catching Jeremy off guard. Rawl pointed to the trembling soldiers in the distance as proof of their inexperience with death. Jeremy, sensing Rawl's perceptive nature and threat potential, ordered his man to cover him from behind. The knight assured Jeremy he'd handle it. Jeremy then leaped into action, hurling his sword toward Rawl. Rawl defended himself with his own weapon, and Jeremy, along with his man, relentlessly attacked Rawl. They inflicted wounds on his face, arms, and other parts of his body. Spotting an opportunity, the knight charged forward to attack Rawl, taking Jeremy by surprise. Despite Jeremy's shouts to stop, Rawl swung his sword, cleaving the man in half. Jeremy berated his fallen comrade as he recognized the urgency of the situation. He employed his Randall sword vision skill and activated Shooting Star, a formidable skill renowned for its one-on-one combat effectiveness. Rawl, even with his psychokinesis, found himself struggling but resolved to persevere. He aimed to push Jeremy back, maintaining his dominance in the fight. He glared at Jeremy, who grew increasingly infuriated and demanded an explanation for Rawl's arrogant demeanor. Rawl calmly replied with 100%, puzzling Jeremy. Then, in a swift motion, Rawl swung his sword, causing Jeremy to release his weapons into the air. Rawl's eyes followed the trajectory of Jeremy's weapons as they soared. He drove his own sword deep into the ground, ready to seize the opportunity. The system indicated that his opponent's skill examination had reached 100%, signaling that the copycat was prepared for use. Following the system's guidance, Rawl aimed to engrave the skill into the decks, employing his psychokinetic abilities to snatch Jeremy's weapons from mid-air. With a swift motion, the weapons flew directly into Rawl's hands. The system prompted him to activate the copycat Randall sword skill, Shooting Star, a grade B skill. Angered, he activated it, directing the weapons towards Jeremy. The Shooting Star skill surged forth, targeting Jeremy in return. Jeremy, shocked, questioned how Rawl had managed to execute the skill. In the midst of the attack, he covered himself with his arms, writhing in pain, demanding to know who had taught Rawl this skill. Rawl appeared beneath Jeremy, revealing that he had been the one to teach him. Confused, Jeremy asked for clarification, but Rawl simply stabbed him in the side and withdrew the blade, causing Jeremy to kneel in agony. The system displayed a rank S bonus, indicating that the Randall sword skill, Shooting Star, grade B, had advanced to intermediate level 1. Rawl had successfully engraved this skill into his skill decks. The system further instructed him to equip the skill in the skill deck selection slot to enable continuous use. Rawl contemplated his newfound abilities and the overpowered nature of the rank S skill Copycat. He understood that Copycat allowed him to copy his opponent's skill, but limited him to one skill at a time. Additionally, he could not lose sight of his target during its activation, or the examination rate would reset. Only in one-on-one combat could he steal a skill effectively. Rawl accessed his skill display, revealing his default skills. Ashton Vision, Sword Skill Bear Crush, Grade A+, at Intermediate Level 2. Psychokinesis, Grade S at Intermediate Level 2. Mind Skill, Grade A at Intermediate Level 1. Copycat, Grade S at Beginner Level 6. And Basic Meditation, Grade E at Beginner Level 8. His skill deck select slots included Flash and Shield, both Grade C at Beginner Level 6, and a random skill slot, Iron Fist, Grade D at Intermediate Level 1. Grateful for his skill decks, which allowed him to utilize 3 more skills, he decided to use the new skill here. However, his attention was drawn to a voice beside him. Jerry fearfully questioned Rawl's identity and how he wielded the Randall sword skill. Rawl acknowledged Jerry's presence, admitting he had overlooked him. He ordered Philip to eliminate them each time they revived for an hour. Philip respectfully agreed and instructed his men accordingly. Jerry pleaded for mercy in his fear, but Rawl remained resolute, understanding that blood must be met with blood. The enemy's agonized screams resonated, and Rawl reminded himself that this was no longer a game, but the harsh reality he faced. He was determined not to falter, even if it meant wading through a sea of blood. Meanwhile, Raldo, who had been observing from a distance, pondered the chaotic situation. He realized that his plan had gone awry. The original scheme had been to mobilize the guards to aid the Randall Knights in their assault against Rawl. However, Rawl had managed to defeat 15 knights single-handedly. Raldo anxiously wondered how Raul had discovered his presence and contemplated if Raul had concealed a county swordmaster, potentially uncovering all of his schemes. He decided that he would have to be more diplomatic with Ashton County in the future. A few minutes later, in his room, Raldo reflected on the situation, realizing that he may have gone too far in his actions. Considering his recent accomplishments, he couldn't help but feel satisfied with the rewards he'd received for completing the sudden quest, Rival Family Challenge. The system displayed the results. His rescue and punishment objectives were both successfully accomplished. As a reward, he gained 30,000 experience points, 30,000 coins, and a random B-grade skill book draw ticket. But there was more, an additional 5,000 gold, a magical bag capable of holding a carriage's worth of luggage, and a unique grade rapier and main go set confiscated from those Randall County scoundrels. Examining the B-grade skill book draw ticket, he mused on his previous luck with the tournament skill book reward. He hoped for at least a mid-tier skill this time and placed the ticket on the table. With a hopeful thought, he broke the ticket in half, releasing a bright light that surprised him. The skill book he acquired was named Rivera Spearmanship, a grade B skill. Joyfully, he realized the importance of spearmanship for his upcoming journey to the capital and felt fortunate for his newfound luck. With the reward secured, he knew there was one more crucial task he needed to accomplish in Mia. It would require a month of investment, but he was determined to succeed. A week later in the forest, he focused on honing his combat skills. He launched his sword, striking down the ogre in front of him. Sweat dripped from his brow as the system displayed his achievement, reaching level 51 and satisfying the requirements for promotion. He now had to decide on his potential promotion. The system confirmed his job as a sword user and his proficiency in job-related skills, including Ashton family hereditary swordsmanship, Randall swordsmanship, and psychokinesis, had increased to mid-level 2. This allowed his job to evolve into sword expert and his beginner psychokinesis to become intermediate psychokinesis. Philip and Jake marveled at his rapid progress, congratulating him on becoming a sword expert at just 15 years old. With a flourish, he raised his hand, causing nearby stones to float. A shout and a swing of his hand sent the stones hurtling towards a massive tree, shattering it into fragments. Philip praised his prowess, while Jake playfully suggested taking a break. Philip, however, promptly reprimanded Jake, emphasizing the need for sleep to catch up with Raul's accomplishments. Jake laughed it off, admitting it was a jest, but Philip insisted Jake was all talk. They agreed that Raul deserved a rest, but intended to keep their progress under wraps for now. Having hunted enough monsters and achieved considerable leveling up, Raul decided it was time to depart. Philip chided Jake to mind his words, and Jake, now realizing he had baited all the traps, pouted and asked Philip what he meant. With their work complete, Raul urged them to return, eagerly awaiting the Empire's response. Meanwhile, in the bustling streets of Mia, Nekia, an alchemist, stretched her body after a day's work. She observed that potions were gaining popularity, possibly due to the efforts of Ashton County, who had begun bringing in monster byproducts. Monsters rarely appeared in the cursed forest, making it challenging to obtain the necessary materials. Thanks to Ashton County's contributions, Nekia could now produce potions regularly. Moreover, county residents frequently visited her shop, inquiring about any events during the night and providing a sense of connection within the community. Nakia, an alchemist in Mia, had come to rely on the support of Ashton County residents. They often inquired about her well-being and if she needed any assistance. While stepping out of her store, she found herself thinking about Raul, who seemed a bit peculiar but undeniably good-looking. Blushing at her own thoughts, she chided herself for entertaining such notions. After all, Raul was just 15 years old, a good 8 years younger than her, and a noble to boot. The peculiar nature of her musings attracted odd glances from people around her. She returned home, excited to announce her arrival to her younger sister, Nikki. However, her calls went unanswered, filling her with a sense of foreboding. As she searched for Nikki, a chilling sight caught her eye, a letter pinned to the bed by a knife. Trembling, she read the contents. The letter conveyed that Nikki had been abducted, and if Nakia wished to see her again, she mustn't breathe a word to anyone and await further instructions. Overwhelmed by fear and despair, Nakia sobbed, refusing to accept this terrible reality. With tears streaming down her face, Nakia realized she couldn't venture beyond the city walls, knowing Nikki's life hung in the balance. She'd heard whispers of kidnappings before, but never believed them to be true. Unsure of where to turn, Nakia considered seeking aid from the city government, but hesitated, fearing the kidnappers might be watching her every move. The city guards, she surmised, wouldn't extend their protection beyond the city limits. Consulting mercenaries from the Adventurer Guild would be time-consuming, leaving Nakia in a quandary. Then, a memory surfaced. Raul had once told her that if she ever found herself in dire straits, she should seek him out. It was a slim hope, but it was her only option. Resolute and desperate, Nakia fled her home, racing to find Raul. Raul accessed the Connect community, entering a premium members-only information cafe that he had operated in his past life as a renowned player. The cafe had become a repository of invaluable information, housing countless hidden gems of knowledge about Connect. He was thrilled to find that it still existed, as it could aid his planning significantly. Searching for the link to the Free City Mura, he discovered a quest starting point at South Mura NPC. He believed he had considered every available quest, leaving him with only hope that things would go as intended. One of his men informed him of Nakia's presence, prompting him to contemplate if he could alter Nakia's fate. He instructed his men to treat Nakia with the utmost respect, well aware of her fearsome reputation as a mad alchemist and taboo destroyer. Nakia was notorious for conducting experiments on humans in her quest for vengeance against the Empire, even if it meant innocent civilians became collateral damage. However, the Nakia before him now was a desperate girl seeking his help. Placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, Raul urged Nakia to calm down. He assured her that Nikki would be safe and promised to assist in any way he could. Overwhelmed, Nakia explained that her sister had been kidnapped and should have been home hours ago, under the care of their neighbor. She implored Raul to rescue Nikki, blaming herself for the situation. Raul reassured her, vowing to find Nikki and making Nakia aghast in disbelief. She begged him to save Nikki, and Raul, confident in his belief of Nikki's whereabouts, promised to keep her informed. He instructed Nakia to stay put, as Bernard would assist her. Gracefully, Bernard advised Nakia to reach out as she required anything, assuring her that she had made the right choice. With their trust in Raul's promises, they set out on their mission. Philip reported that Pierce was tracking them and had secured permission from Mayor Raldo. Raul acknowledged this news with approval. The raid quest was directed at Free City Mura, with the primary goal being the elimination of the unknown rogues. The additional objective was the rescue of hostages and the eradication of the hideouts hidden within the forest. The quest description explained that a mysterious group of rogues had been causing trouble in the forests surrounding Nia City. Mayor Raldo had requested a decisive action against these rogues who had been involved in kidnappings and obstructing trade. The rewards for completing the mission were enticing: substantial experience points, coins, recognition from the mayor, and unknown items. Raul inquired if Philip had already provided Mayor Raldo with the list of rogues, to which Philip confirmed that Raldo had promised rewards for this valuable information. Satisfied that he had thoroughly planned their mission and left no gaps, Raul instructed his men to proceed. Jake, brimming with excitement, readily agreed, completely unaware that two spies were concealed in the nearby bushes. Meanwhile, within the forest, Pierce and the Ashton County Golden Bear Knights, along with Raul's Guard Knights, continued their exploration. Pierce believed they were closing in on their target based on the telltale signs on the ground. It was time to initiate their operation. He leaped onto a tree branch, prepared to utilize his newly acquired skill. Activating his detection skill, he meticulously scoured the forest. To his astonishment, he spotted hidden men nearby, armed with bows and arrows. Phantom magic circles and barriers adorned the vicinity. Pierce knew he needed to report this discovery immediately. Raul's message indicated they would arrive in 5 minutes. Recollecting the events of 5 months ago, he pondered Raul's background. Raul was the youngest son, known for his apparent weakness and lack of talent compared to his brothers. At first, many servants and knights hesitated to accompany him on his journey, and even when Raul sought volunteers, few showed interest. It was during Raul's visit to the Knights' training ground, where he personally engaged with the Knights, that Pierce's opinion began to shift. Raul demonstrated Pierce's sword techniques himself, identifying the flaws and offering guidance. Initially skeptical about what a young boy like Raul could teach him, Pierce decided to give it a chance. To his surprise, every swing of the sword felt smoother under Raul's guidance. Raul emphasized that Pierce's strength lay in agility, not brute force. He encouraged Pierce to enhance his archery skills, even though very few were aware of Pierce's bowmanship. Pierce realized that Raul might be the one capable of helping him reach new heights. He believed that those who had rejected Raul's offer were likely regretting their decision now. Pierce couldn't fathom why Raul had concealed his true power, but the skill books Raul had provided had elevated him to the high expert stage, allowing him to hone other skills as well. He mused that today might be the day when Raul would unveil his true potential. Someone approached, prompting him to jump off a tree branch and bow respectfully. Alongside the other knights, he greeted the newcomer, who was none other than Pierce. His attention was soon drawn to an unknown rogue's hideout, marked as unknown grade and unknown size. The hideout exhibited a 3-circle or higher magic circle interfering with vision, and a 3rd circle magic that deterred anyone who approached. He faced a dilemma: should he destroy the magic circle or find another way in to gather vital information? He contemplated the situation, recognizing that rogue activities transcended different cities. Spies from the Kranen Empire posed a significant threat in Mia, disrupting player coordination. Known as the Imperial Hounds, they hunted players and blackmailed them to prevent unity. He understood the importance of dealing with them. He called upon Pierce, whose arrows found their mark, striking down the men hiding behind the magic circle. With the immediate threat eliminated, they cautiously entered the barrier. Near the entrance, there was no sign of anyone. He considered using a scroll to dispel the magic circle, but hesitated as he examined the flow of mana. He decided to forego the scroll and instead infused mana into his weapon. Retrieving his dagger from his inventory, he launched it towards the magical flow. The dagger struck the magic circle on the ground, causing it to slowly crack and ultimately shatter. It was a practical approach that saved him the expense of buying scrolls. Pierce, who had anticipated their young master's resourcefulness, summoned 2 men named Jackson and Nil to execute their prearranged plan. He assured them that he'd signal when it was time to enter, to which they readily agreed. Descending from the tree branch, Pierce confidently led the way, bolstered by the presence of elite knights. In his mind, he envisioned hunting down their enemies. He reminded himself that they didn't require captives and should finish off all the opponents. He emphasized the use of the rapier for the final blow. Jake, puzzled by the necessity of using a rapier in such a scenario, voiced his compliance, trusting their leader's judgment. Raul assigned Pierce the task of locating the kidnapped individuals, with a priority on rescuing Nakia's younger sister, Nikki. Pierce acknowledged the directive, and Raul called upon Philip, who readily agreed to assist. Employing his psychokinesis, Raul instructed them to open the massive door that loomed before them. They ventured further into the tunnel, with Pierce casting a backward glance as he gradually faded from view. The system confirmed Pierce's successful infiltration of the enemy's base, prompting Raul to prepare for the hunt. The cave's ceiling and wooden fences loomed around them, and the rogues' levels hovered around 30 to 31, not significantly different from typical thieves. Having checked their surroundings, Pierce was ready to make their move. Raul took charge of the situation, signaling Jake and Philip to follow his lead with a raised hand. He quickly issued orders, instructing Jake to move left, Philip to head straight ahead, and he would take the right flank. With clenched fists, they sprinted toward their designated paths. Raul raced up the stairs, leaving the men atop them bewildered as to his identity. In a flash, he materialized above them. Catching them off guard, he swiftly hurled his knives at their heads, taking them down with precision. As he landed on the stair handle, he snatched his bow and arrow from behind him. Without hesitation, he aimed the arrow at a guard and released it, eliminating his target. In the center of the action, Philip was engaged in fierce combat, slashing through the adversaries. On the left flank, Jake mirrored Philip's efforts. However, a lookout on the upper level caught sight of them and sounded the alarm, shouting about intruders. He ordered the guards to defend the fences and to eliminate the intruders. As the enemies multiplied, they began blocking Raul's arrows. One of the rogues instructed his comrade to aim at Raul and shoot him down. Arrows were unleashed toward Raul, but he countered with his psychokinetic abilities, halting the incoming arrows in midair. One rogue questioned whether Raul had deflected the arrows with some sort of magic, while another hastily called for backup from downstairs. The rogues rushed toward the stairs to confront Raul directly. One of them declared that arrows were ineffective against him and suggested swarming him instead. Raul repositioned his bow and drew his daggers, wielding them simultaneously. With a swift push, he sent a rogue hurtling backward, crashing into his companions, leaving everyone astonished. Utilizing his psychokinetic prowess, Raul levitated the arrows strewn on the ground. He carefully arranged them around himself before soaring into the air, carrying his daggers, arrows orbiting him like a deadly halo. A rogue marveled, suspecting it to be magic and deeming it impossible. Raul maneuvered the arrows with precision and directed them toward the rogues below. With a synchronized release, the arrows found their marks, hitting numerous rogues. Raul observed his adversaries struggling against the onslaught while contemplating the need to exert more force to pierce through their armor. He gracefully leaped from the stair handle, descending upon a fleeing rogue. In a fluid motion, he impaled the man with his rapier. Turning his gaze back, Rawl witnessed Philip and Jake dispatching the remaining rogues. Some cried out to their comrades to flee, dubbing Rawl and his team as monsters. Another rogues begged for mercy when faced with Jake wielding the rapier, but Jake ruthlessly struck him down. Rawl noted Jake's reluctance to use the rapier, which he considered wasteful in terms of mana. He recalled that Ashton had cautioned Jake multiple times against revealing his swordsmanship skills, emphasizing the need to leave no traces behind. Nonetheless, Rawl wasn't overly concerned. He noticed someone attempting a sneak attack from behind, unaware of Pierce's presence.